Welcome to the Daily Objective. It is day 50 of the war in Israel. I'm joined by James Valliant. We are going to talk about Palestinian culture today. And I think, we try to do some news updates with these shows. I think the news update we have today is um, uh, Palestinian culture explained in a news update. So Hamas has um, delayed after in the first day of the agreement of Hamas releasing the some of the innocent civilians it took hostage, particularly uh, children and women. Israel, in exchange, is releasing some terrorists who have committed terrorist attacks. So Hamas is now, kept its end of the bargain on the first day. On the second day, it is not doing that. On the first day, it was later than was supposed to. And of course, this is something we've been talking about on this channel. We were saying, we can pre-record an episode about Hamas violating the agreement. Here it is, and they of course are accusing Israel of violating it. The news reports that there is a negotiation going on. Israel is saying, if the deal is off, then we go back to fighting. Also, Israel said that today somebody in the IDF said that when the deal is over, when the hostages are released, it will go back to fighting. So yeah, I don't know what to hope for in this case. I think the hostage situation is the best example of Palestinian culture explained with with a foil. So Israeli culture, you can see what it is and what it celebrates with the emphasis that it has been put from the start of this war on releasing the hostages. 1,400 Israelis were slaughtered. Most of the focus has been on the hostages because these are people who are still alive who could potentially be saved. Whereas Palestinian culture celebrates death wherever it is and causes it wherever it can. So they did that in Israel. They celebrated that. You can see the videos of the celebrations in Gaza when bodies were brought back or hostages were brought back. Um, and you can see the way Hamas celebrates it's in a different way the death of its own people who it hides behind and tries to cause their death as much as possible. Now, in that case, I think that is very much inspired by the way the Western media and Western politicians report on such deaths. But it does show, I think, a fundamental, the fundamental difference between Palestinian culture and civilized cultures. So, James, your initial thoughts about Palestinian culture, what it is, and maybe the how it ties into the latest news.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that they're still holding hostages at all is an atrocity. They are, I mean, just releasing children and grandmothers, mostly what they've been released, the few that have been released so far, I mean, only emphasizes what an atrocity it was in the first place to take hostages. They could release any and all of them immediately and change the whole context here. But of course they won't because they have no, this is the thing. It is a death cult. We've said it, we've described it in those terms on this channel before. When you've delivered your mind over to total mysticism, you've become a worshiper of death. You're hostile to life on earth as such. Your contrast to and that's the whole thing. Every time I see a child and a grandmother released, of course, I'm happy. How can I not be overjoyed that there's one less victim? Now, my joy is tempered. My joy is tempered because I know all of the bargaining for hostages that led to this hostage taking in the first place. And I know the consequences. And I can't tell you when, I can't tell you where, or what new atrocity or hostage taking will happen, how many more October 7ths we're going to have to suffer before we learn the long-term consequences of this. But you're right, it does show the value of life that Israelis place uh, on each one of these human beings, and just the exact opposite philosophy. So when you've delivered your mind completely over to mysticism, you are, of course, rooted in a perceptual, anti-conceptual mentality. So all you can be is a collectivist tribalist. And then the measure of your virtue can only be how much you're willing to die and how many of your own people you're willing to kill and sacrifice in the name of this collectivist tribalist cause that you've delivered yourself. And as you say, there's a feedback loop effect. The West, buying into their own version of altruism and collectivism, support that, and they get all kinds of psychological feedback from the international community saying, yeah, so that it encourages this monstrous strategy of using human lives as bargaining chips. It's a monstrous, inhuman strategy, and you can really see the death cult that is Hamas. And I would step back and I would say Islamicism generally. You can see it in the whether it's Shia or Sunni. You can see it throughout the Muslim culture. The extreme Muslims today are they've delivered their minds completely over to mysticism and collectivism, and to how much they can sacrifice, and now to just how atrocious they can take out their hatred of life on earth on innocent human beings who are just trying to live their lives peacefully. Yeah, it's a death cult. That's my only explanation here. And the contrast, and we objectivists have the unique answer. It's this axis of ideological evil between mysticism, altruism, and collectivism. When you have delivered your mind so thoroughly to mysticism, you will almost inevitably become a violent collectivist who has no respect for life, the lives of other children, even the lives of your own children. And that's what we're seeing playing out before our very eyes.
Yeah, before we continue, I do want to, I forgot to say this in the intro, but we were supposed to have an interview with David Deutsch today. That has been postponed. It will happen hopefully in the next few days, but we couldn't have done it today.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm no replacement, but I am looking forward to that. Yeah, we really should. Yeah.
yeah, and again, as soon as we know when it happens, we will let everybody know so we can prepare, plan accordingly. Yeah, on this thing with hostages, just yeah, Israel has with its previous policies on releasing 1,000 terrorists for a soldier. Um, Again, it shows how much Israel values life, but it also made it's I think I said this yesterday. It's a misguided application of the value of life, and it has put every Israeli is now more of a target in that sense, in the sense that they would be kidnapped if any terrorist organization could kidnap an Israeli, they would, because they know what it's worth. Now with Gilad Shalit, the soldier who was released in exchange for 1,000 terrorists. One of the terrorists released was Yahya Sinwar, who is now the head of Hamas in Gaza, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, the mastermind of the hostage taking, and the person who is leading this negotiation and playing Israel now.
Well, Israel isn't allowing enough aid, I guess. And so that's supposed to be an excuse for keeping more innocent civilians hostage. It's absolutely repulsive. The negotiations are even going on, in my view. But I am, as I say, grateful for each one of these hostages released. That's one less hostage. But I can't help see, in order to value human life, you have to think conceptually. You cannot think you can't use pictures as arguments. The picture of a 5-year-old girl being released and the emotion of her family greeting her there, that picture could overwhelm you. You have to think conceptually. You have to think long term. You have to think in principle. You have to consider what kind of deals Israel and America has been making with these monsters, including Iran, that has encouraged hostage taking. And then you have to think about the consequences. How many October 7ths will we have to pay because of this? In order to value human life, you have to think conceptually. And a single image and a single emotion from some mother who gets her child back, or some grandmother who gets released and her family is hugging her, can't be what what controls our thinking, that kind of image to emotion thing. Not to say I do not value each and every one of these lives, which obviously the Israeli government does in a way that Hamas is unknown to those monsters with Hamas, who are so mired in their primitive mysticism that they're willing to kill their own, in fact, use the death of their own babies as strategy.
Yeah, and that also goes to the humanitarian aid point. Like humanitarian aid is not a Palestinian culture thing. It's a Western culture thing. And this is and the Palestinians are using it because any means necessary to get to the goal of wiping the Jews off the map, throwing them into the sea, or whatever it takes to get rid of Israel and its inhabitants. So Hamas does not care about humanitarian aid. I'm sure there's somewhere in Gaza somebody who might be hungry, but this is not the point for Hamas at any point. And the humanitarian aid, of course, all of it goes to wherever Hamas decides. So if it goes to civilians, it goes to civilians that Hamas decided it should go to, and they have a reason to choose those civilians. And again, like even talking about civilians, this is something that we should remember in this type of war. In a sense, they're all civilians. Hamas terrorists are civilians. They're not soldiers wearing uniforms in military bases where you know who you're attacking because they're wearing a uniform and they're in a base. These are terrorists who are in civilian clothing, hiding among civilians, hiding behind civilians intentionally. I assume there's no hospital or school in Gaza where there is no terrorist activity because again they know how to play the West.
Completely, and that's how they're doing it. There's intentional strategies to put their weapons caches in hospitals, to hide their leadership under the biggest the HQ under their hospital. One good thing my president said, and I have been critical of President Biden, is he said Hamas doesn't give a damn. He used the very phrase I used 2 weeks ago. Hamas doesn't give a damn about civilians, and the Israelis are the only ones who give a damn about civilians, and that's obviously true. And you're blind, deaf, and dumb, or actually, to be more accurate, anti-conceptual if you cannot see that clear difference.
So I want to thank our super chatters, Jonathan, Mark, Bonnie. Thank you all for the super chats. I did get a question before the show from a friend of the channel. I won't name them because this was in a text, but I will read it out because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. So the question was: suppose Israel were to tell Hamas, "We have good reason to believe that there is a doomsday device in your water supply. If triggered, all your water will be contaminated with," and then a bunch of diseases are listed. I'm not going to read them as with yesterday. I don't read Latin on the show. I think there should be like $100 super chat minimum for me willfully embarrassing myself. If it's unintentional, that's a different story.
You have
Anyway, a bunch of
problem.
diseases. We cannot find it, but we know it is triggered by seismic events such as rocket detonations. If you do not want to watch everyone around you die a horrible death, please make sure another rocket is never fired from Gaza. What do you think would happen? So first of all, I think this is a bit of a fantasy
It is
scenario, but
by scenario,
but of course,
that's
Hamas would welcome the death and ideally for them the most cruel death possible for as many Palestinians as possible because of its useful idiots in the West. And by the way, this is something we need to talk about in the context of Palestinian culture and how the West feeds it. Because I think none of the I don't know how many hospitals Hamas would hide in if Israel didn't say we're not going to target hospitals, and if the West didn't make a big deal of it. Every single person in the media who reported immediately after that misfired rocket that 500 people died knew they were lying. 100% of them knew.
oh yeah,
In
yeah.
the
They
same
had
way,
they
James,
were lying outright. Come on.
if I tell you now it is Sunday, April 34th, it's that level of knowledge of what you're saying is bullshit. because they've been covering this long enough. They've seen
Yeah.
Hamas and they've seen the PLO do this time and time again, and they also know the basic fact that if 500 people die in an explosion, you do not know that within seconds. It
You
takes
cannot know that
many
with.
hours or days to actually
No, within a half an hour, they were reporting Hamas numbers as if they were absolutely true. And Western media outlets continue to rely on numbers coming from Hamas. It is unspeakable. It is obscene. And the questions that Israelis and Americans are getting in foreign press about this are themselves obscene. Frankly, it's disgusting to confront someone with the Hamas numbers as if they're true and expect an Israeli official to respond to that as if it were credible. No, it's disgusting.
We have a super chat from Philosophical Zombie Hunter. Now, that is less than, I appreciate the super chat, but it is less than $100, so I'm not going to read the Arabic. I will just read the English translation. So Palestinians have a saying, holy war or martyrdom. No third option, like living a good life. Yeah, that's a thing. Generally, when you take religion, the more you take religion seriously, uh, the worse the worst of a human being you are. And I think this is across the board. We saw Candace Owens tweeting, uh, what was it, a few weeks ago, something about Taylor Swift and the Christ statue in Brazil, something about that. Anyway, she said, this is blasphemy. It should not be allowed. Yeah, and I just by reading that, I imagine the type of country America would be if Candace Owens was in charge.
Christian
So
conservatives were allowed to run countries. The Dark Ages would come back in a hurry. Blasphemies should not be allowed. No, it's in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia where they arrest and execute people for religious blasphemy. No, I
yeah, I
thought
mean Candace Owens is one of the top cheerleaders for Hamas nowadays. So she's consistent on that point. Um,
vile.
Yeah. So well, philosophical zombie hunter, I agree with you. Yeah, this is what Palestinian culture is. So it also goes back to the point that we make on this channel every day and nobody else makes, at least not nobody in mainstream media makes, which is there is, this separation that we're being told we have to make between Hamas and the Palestinian people is a lie. Hamas is a true representative of Palestinian people, Palestinian culture, and yeah,
We
what we saw.
piles of circumstantial evidence that show the vast majority of Palestinians are on the side. And the only real question is which terrorist are they in favor of? Are they in favor of this, Islamicist group or that Islamicist group? Well, that's nothing. No, no. They're all, and that's all you have to do, folks. Listen to the philosophy of the Ayatollahs from Iran. Listen to the Wahhabi teachers in Saudi Arabia. Listen to this vile, deep. They've delivered their minds entirely. I mean, they don't even have a little compartmentalized area for reason. These people have delivered their minds completely over to mysticism, and that results in a tribalist, racist hatred of Jews, and by the way, in a total hatred of the West as such, as evil and decadent. And don't confuse yourself about any of this, people. It is civilization that they hate because these people are savage, primitive mystics in their philosophy. So that when you read the actual declarations that Hamas has come out with, they celebrate racism, mysticism, self-destruction, and you're right, martyrdom. They would rather die because you see there's this supernatural dimension awaiting for them and they really take it seriously. They would rather die if it could help take down Jews than live a happy life. They really are that anti-life. It's a death cult. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that was a good point you made at the beginning there about, it depends. There's different Islamists you can side with. So yeah, not everybody in Gaza is with Hamas. Not everybody not all the hostages are held by Hamas. Some of them are held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which participated in the October 7th attack and is a different organization, and sometimes we see them, disagreeing with each other on what is the right time or method to kill the Jews. So, but yeah, in terms of, if we're talking about a culture that makes it possible for such organizations to flourish, that is what Palestinian culture is. And another thing we shouldn't do is, other than separate Hamas and the people of Gaza, is uh, try to differentiate between the Palestinians in Gaza and the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, as it's called, because they are one and the same. They are on the same page. This particular attack came from from Gaza. Past attacks have come from the West Bank. In 2002, I believe it was, when there were daily terrorist attacks. They all came from the West Bank. Every day a terrorist came from the West Bank. Right now there's trouble going on there. There's some fighting, but nothing significant enough for it to be major news anywhere. So yeah, Palestinian culture, Palestinian culture is not that unique. It's not like there's people in Gaza and in the West Bank who celebrate death, and nowhere else does this happen. This happens, this is very widespread in the Islamic world, and unfortunately, we see at least elements of it in the West. Although the people in the West who side with these savages are happy to enjoy some of the freedoms and luxuries that we have here in the West that you wouldn't have in Gaza, because of course they can always get on a plane and join their brothers in arms in Gaza, or
Yeah, you
get on
see,
a
the Hamas.
environmentally friendly boat.
Yeah, the Hamas leadership is living cozy lives over in Qatar and the Four Seasons Hotel and the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and they're not touched by what's going on. And besides, they know their people are happy to die because they're good, faithful Islamicist martyrs for the cause. Absolutely. But this pattern has played out in history again and again and again. That triad, as I say, between mysticism, collectivism, and altruism, the alliance that Ayn Rand termed so eloquently, the witch doctor in the Attila, is an ancient one. Only today we're seeing it most aggressively in its most ugly, virulent form in the Islamic world. And if you can't see that, ladies and gentlemen, if you can't see that's exactly what's going on, the comparatively civilized world is having to, and all my life, since I was 10 years old and saw the attack on the Jews at the Munich Olympics, when I was only 10 years old, and then I saw, of course, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and then I saw 9/11, and I've seen all kinds of other terrorism, smaller terrorist incidents, a shooting up of a gay nightclub in Florida by some Islamicist fanatics, again and again. How many decades do we have to put up with their life hatred, with their murder, with their attack on civilization itself, before we conceptually abstract and make the point in our own heads? They determine the term. They've dictated. They don't determine. They've dictated the terms by which we must treat them, by force. It's the only thing they're going to respect. It's the only thing that'll get through to them that Allah is not on their side. It's the only thing that's going to stop this. The only language they understand, and the terms they have dictated that the West use. We better get that clear in our heads.
Yeah, by the way, you mentioned the terrorist attack in a gay nightclub in Orlando. I think, and the British people in the audience can maybe remember this better, but I think Owen Jones, who we've mentioned on this channel and also did a show about, I think at the time he said something like this is a homophobic attack, or something like that, kind of denying the Islamic element of it. Now, Owen Jones, go on his Twitter, scroll as much as you can from the past 50 days. He is a denier of things. So Megan with a super chat, thank you, Megan. She responds to the question that I got via text that I mentioned earlier. She says, this hypothetical is not a fantasy. The right scientist, perhaps grieving her child, could do it. Well, the one thing that definitely is, I think we can say is true, is that for Hamas, the death of civilians in Gaza is a win. any death of any civilian is a win, especially when it can be reported, when again, the useful idiots in the West, in Western media, rally behind them, report whatever Hamas tells them, read out whatever Hamas writes for them, which is basically how the news is reported from the Middle East. We've mentioned, we talked about it a lot, and I think as our coverage of the war continues, this is something we're going to talk about probably on a daily basis. I just saw a clip of Kay Burley being stupid again today. So she's going to be she's going to be spoken of on this channel presumably some more. Unfortunately, I'm laughing, but it's not a funny matter. Philosophical Zombie Hunter, thank you for the additional super chat and for keeping it purely English. Will you do a show on Islamo-leftism? I don't know if we've done a show specifically on that. We do talk about the weird connection. I've mentioned, I think a couple of times, I mentioned yesterday with my interview with Douglas Carswell, the documentary that I watched the beginning of and switched off after a few minutes years ago, about the Iranian revolution and how communists were fighting alongside the Islamists, and then were shocked to see the results. I don't think they
Well, an interesting example of that is Professor Finkelstein recently, an American academic who, of course, was sympathetic from the outset, is now having to, in just an insane way, explain his monstrous attitudes. But here you've got this totally, here is a Western academic. He's a professor at a university, and here he is defending Islamicism, in effect, defending Islamicism directly. And so there is a definite connection between certain leftist intellectuals, Jewish in origin leftist intellectuals in some cases, which is interesting. But you've got these leftist intellectuals who are absolutely pro-Islamicist. The connection. We have a Hamas wing in the American Congress led by Rashida Tlaib. They are absolute sympathizers with Hamas. They're defenders of these atrocities. They can't open their mouth to even denounce the atrocities on October 7th. So there's absolutely a connection there. And we will continue, I hope, to explore it.
Yeah, and Professor Finkelstein, I've been thinking about whether we should do an episode about him. I tweeted about some video of his a few hours ago. Everybody, once you like this show, you can go over and retweet that. But this guy is such an absolute scumbag that I don't know if I can sit and talk about him for 30 minutes without, I have a can next to me, just a garbage can just in case. But yeah, he really is
Yeah, right.
He's a great example of how bad a human being can get. We have free will, and then where we go is our choice, and we can go to the absolute
They're just people who give free will a bad name. Yeah.
Well, here on this channel, we try to give free will a good name, and we will continue to do that in the ARCUK Philosophy Forum, which starts in just about after we're done here. Today is a special hybrid session. It is open online to members of on the platinum level and above. But it is also open in person for free to anybody joining us at the London Ayn Rand meetup in person. Only if you can join in person. And we do have a question. So Jeff Bannister, thank you for the super chat. He says there was a question in the chat. Is that a question that you sent, Jeff? Because I can't find it. Daniel, if you know what the question is, please send it to me. If not, then because we do have to, super chat won't allow it. Do you want to text it to me very quickly? And if not, we will. You can send it to me and we'll read it out on tomorrow's show, or the next show we have that isn't the David Deutsch interview. All right, Jeff. So yeah, please send that question to me. We will ask it tomorrow or the next day. Thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you back here tomorrow. And if you are a member, Platinum, Reardon Medal, or Midas Mulligan member, we'll see you at the Philosophy Forum, which is starting now. Thanks.
Stay safe. Be well.